Well, that's what. Good afternoon. Be it Monday, December 13th at 4:30, I'm calling this Human Resources Committee to order with a quorum present in council chambers. And we will begin with one, approval of the 11/8/2021 minutes. They're in your packet. Any questions or concerns? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to accept. Oh, perfect. Motion by Herb, second.
By Lou.
Lou, did you have a question? Or no? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, myself. And anybody opposed? No, that passes. Number 2, Human Resources Report for November. It's in your packet. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put that on file. Number 3, discussion and possible action approving an increase of firefighting staffing levels. And I'm going to give the podium to Chief Bartek, and I am told to move, so.
He managed to get it down here on this screen for you all so I can see it, as long as all of you can. I apologize for the size of the packet that I gave you in advance, but I wanted to, as this goes through each committee, not short any other committee the information that was provided to others. And so I'm just choosing to add on. So as we go to Finance Committee next with this, depending on what occurs tonight, I'll add on to the packet even further. So at the Public Health and Safety, I really presented the safety reasons why our community needs to increase our staffing level of our firefighters and paramedics to our department. And I think that they felt that that was a compelling argument that we need to increase that staffing. And that carrying forward to yours, to your committee, I wanted to talk about the deployment, how that actually looks, what the additional firefighter deployment actually looks like, and unfortunately some of the hurdles that are going to come along our way in the deployment of these firefighters. And so I've put a short PowerPoint presentation here. I try to condense your decision making down to 3 options tonight that you can look at. Of course, there's inside those options, many abilities to make maneuvers and whatnot, dependent upon what you feel their appropriate level of additional staffing is and over what timeline. As I presented when I came and talked with you all at the Common Council meeting, we're really looking to do this over 2 to 3 years to see this added increased staffing. So I'll see if I can get this thing working. There we go. So I wanted to talk about what our goals were. The goal of our department is to add an additional firefighter paramedic to each of the city's 3 engines. So we have 3 24-hour crews that work in a California-style schedule in which they work 24-hour schedules. In case you didn't know, firefighters, we're exempt from the 40-hour work week. We have our own FLSA laws that cover us, and a work week for us is 56 hours. And that's over a year average, the number of hours worked in a year average. We have our own set of labor laws that affect us, and so if we were to do a 40-hour work week inside the fire departments, we would have to have a 4th shift. We get away with 3. So currently our 3 city engines are staffed with an engineer and a lieutenant, which I highlighted before. And really at the core of this, what we're looking to do is our current minimum staffing is 15 firefighter paramedics every day, and that's split between battalion chief, 3 lieutenants, engineers, and firefighter paramedics working at the 3 fire stations. So right now we have a minimum staffing of 15, and we're looking to increase that to 18 and putting that additional staffing personnel into the rear seat of each of the engines, each of the city's 3 engines, therefore providing that firefighter paramedic on the 3. So here's our current staffing configuration. There's a screenshot. I apologize now on here. It looks really, really small, but that's a sample. The day that I was putting this PowerPoint presentation was the 6th. Actually, I've got a copy of that in your pack that I gave you too. That's a screenshot of our IntelliTime. Just an average day for us. It's not an extraordinary day. We don't have a bunch of outages that day. If you see in the bottom, we've got 1 person using perfect attendance leave. We've got 1 person on sick leave, and we got another person on vacation leave. Really what I'm going to highlight for a problem is as we grow our staff, we need also to grow our ability to allow that staff paid time off. And currently, with a 18-person crews, we have a 15-person minimum, so that leaves us 3 spots to work with for time off. 2 of those spots are reserved for Local 415, the union, which has 51 members that staff the 3 crews. It's for their paid time off. And I've got a whole breakdown on how much time that they get to use and the different types that I'll get to here in a little bit. But basically, it's vacation time, personal time, perfect attendance leave, holidays that they can take off. The third slot is reserved for the use of sick leave, FMLA, and the battalion chief's paid time off. So the battalion chief does not pick inside the union's 2 spots. They're separated from that. It's actually a great benefit. One of the things that we can offer the battalion chiefs when they take that promotion is that they come out of having to pick inside the union's very narrow time gap that they've got to post their time. So we have 17 firefighters picking for 2 vacation slots. And so they usually pick that starting in November and December, going into the next year. It's highly competitive. They actually have more time coming to them than is available in that calendar. And I'm going to break that down, which is what's going to cause the problem for us when we add the additional staffing. So I'm going to give you 3 options tonight. One is hiring 9 and 2 different options under hiring 9. And then I also put a hire 12 firefighter paramedics on here to help with that relief of the overtime / sick leave FMLA and that third slot that we have currently reserved for those types of leave inside of our daily calendar. So if we were to get 9 firefighter paramedics, that would take us to 21-person crews. Of course, we've got a battalion chief who's in management, and we'd have 20 local 415 members staffing it. The real goal here is if we're going to stay at the 18 minimum staffing, that leaves us 3 slots. We really need to open up a 3rd slot for the local to take their time. They already have the ability to exceed the number of hours that are available for them to post their vacation and paid time off in the calendar. We have to open up a 3rd spot for them as soon as we add some additional staffing. This is where the problem comes into play. So if we were to go to 18-person minimum and only hiring 9, that means that now whenever the battalion chief takes off or we have sick leave or FMLA leave on that crew, we're going to have to hire overtime. Overtime is one of the things that we're also trying to move away from because, as you recall from my presentation, we've been having to mandate a very large amount of overtime this last year. Our staff works a lot of overtime, and it's just not popular after a certain point. You know, they want to be home. They want to be with their families. They want to enjoy their lives. So we expect an increase in our overtime budget also if we were to go that route, hiring 9 firefighters and wanting to stay with the 18-person minimum. So the way around that could be hiring 12 additional firefighter paramedics, going to 22-person crews, and then opening up a fourth vacation time off slot. So we would have 1 slot available for sick leave, FMLA, and the battalion chief leave that's not open to the union to post time in, just as we do now. And then we'd have 3 slots reserved for local 415 members to take their time. It would definitely help control our overtime budget inside the department, and it would also allow us to kind of relieve some of the pressure when we have those short notice sick leave, FMLA leave type things, and the fact that we don't always have to pull back overtime for that. So that's 2 of the options. The third option, to go back to hiring 9, and this is not the option that I recommend, but it is an option that's in front of you, and I feel that it's my place as fire chief to explain everything I see from my position as an option to you. And as I've asked for 9 firefighters in the past, and now I'm offering another, solution to hiring 12, I also need to explain if we go back, if we retreat from that. So that would be to hire 9 firefighters, but only staff 2 of the city 3 engines at 3 firefighters. So how that would work is at engine 2 and engine 3, we would assign a firefighter paramedic to that. The downtown station wouldn't have a firefighter paramedic assigned to the engine. We would instead open up a 4th off vacation slot or time off slot that's available. Now, when that slot isn't filled, then we would take that extra person, and of course that would be the priority, is to assign a firefighter paramedic to the back of engine 1. But it would then also solve that overtime issue that we would have. And so we've got 2 options within hiring 9 firefighter paramedics, And we've got an option to hire 12 and relieve some of the problems that we would have if we hire 9. And I apologize for not bringing this forward when I did my big presentation in front of the council. I'll tell you at that point, I was digging deep into the data as far as how we measured against our national benchmarks, how we were affected, how we could have positively affect our ISO rating, and some of the other concurrent call issues that we were having, and looking more at that data. I wasn't looking at the realities of welcoming into the department, and then what do we do to give them all their pay and benefits, including their paid time off. So I'm going to give you a breakdown on where that's coming from. So here's a current summary of our paid time off for our personnel. So they get it in a number of different ways. They, of course, earn vacation. They do get some personal days by contract. They do get the ability to earn perfect attendance leave, which is popular in our department. And in recent contract negotiations, they bargained the right to not be paid for their holidays, but take that as time off. And I'm going to apologize. In the packet that I gave to you, I told you that in that packet that our employees can earn up to 6 paid off days for holidays. It's actually 5. I've made that adjustment in this chart. So we currently have 18-person crews, 15-person minimum. We've got 51 firefighters inside a local 415. If you add up their total number of vacation days, they get and what I did is I took the department makeup as it is today, all of the vacation time that's earned and is going to be used in 2022. And then the open positions that we have right now, we've got 5 open positions for firefighter, paramedic. I put 2 weeks of vacation in for each of them. And so that added up to 433 days of vacation that our firefighters have available to them. They also have 102 personal days available to them. If they all participated in the perfect attendance leave, they could have up to 102 perfect attendance days. And if they all chose to take their holidays as time off and not pay, that adds up to 255 days. Now, I've got asterisks by both the PAL and the holidays. Now, not all firefighters earn PAL. Some do use sick leave, and then, of course, that takes that away from them being able to earn the perfect attendance leave. If I had to give a guess, it's about half our department is currently earning perfect attendance day leave. And not all the firefighters take their holidays as time off. Well, of course, that is heavily affected by the fact that there's no open days in the vacation calendar. So where does that put us as in the excess or deficiency? So we're deficient 162 days of available open time for our employees to take their paid leave. So like I say, those 2 spots in the union are very competitive. They're very popular. We've got 17 people per crew competing for those 2 spots. And so the calendar fills very quickly. In addition, then we have our 3 battalion chiefs, and so obviously it's only 3 instead of 51, much less time. They're all maxed out. They're senior employees. They're maxed out on their vacation with 15 days each. So they have total between all those 3, they've got 72 days of available time coming from them. And of course, 365 days are available because we have 1 slot per day. So that leaves us an excess of 293 days. And so how our department has used those 293 days is when we have a sick leave call in, like as in the example that I gave on December 6th, we don't have to hire back overtime that day. We've got an available position to put that person's time off in. And then FMLA also gets into there. So I did also a breakdown on sick leave and FMLA use inside our department. And this is just through and it goes by not month, but it goes by pay period. So the latest pay period in November that our admin had the data for that I was able to go and grab. So FMLA use in our department has been very high this year. There's several drivers to that. Tony could probably be a better explanation of that. I do believe a lot of it, we've had a number of our firefighters that have children this last year, so a lot of it's for birth of a child. There's some other things that have gone on, medical needs that people have had, and they take their FMLA time as granted to them or as allowed to them. So we've had a total of 122 days of FMLA, or 2,937 hours, and a total cost to us for that is about $76,000. Sick leave, that this may look high looking at that, but to have an organization the size of ours and to only have 79 sick days in a year, that's not too bad at all. We're doing really well, but that's still time off that we've got to be prepared to meet that challenge with and have a plan to backfill those positions when we do have employees that are sick and can't come into work. So that's a total of 211 days. Tony, would you be able to click that back? I don't know if I can. So that's 211 days, and if you look on our battalion chief slot there, we had an excess of 293 days available. So now, in a perfect world, we would have, every time we would have a sick day or an FMLA day, we could plan it. We can't. And a lot of times we've got crews that have multiple sick day outages or multiple FMLA at the same time. I'm not saying we can get rid of FMLA, overtime from FMLA or sick leave. I'm saying that it works well, that current system of having that third time off slot for all those different usages from sick leave, FMLA, and the battalion chiefs use. So those are some of the drivers of this decision making that make it really difficult. So what's my recommendation to you tonight as you continue the conversation here on our community's behalf about hiring additional firefighters? It's my recommendation that the city commit to having 3-person engine companies. I think that that's the real reason that we're driving this. We have been stagnant for 52 years without hiring, and over that time we have continued to meet this community's needs despite the massive hurdles in our way. And now we need to correct this, and it's going to have to be a large course correction because there wasn't course corrections done at periods of time along the way. Ideally, every 10 to 20 years, you're looking at staffing inside of a department and determining whether it's appropriate or not. And unfortunately, that wasn't done. And so now we are here left with this decision today if we're going to make a course correction. So it's my recommendation that we change the daily minimum staffing from 15 to 18 to meet that. This requires at least a minimum of 9 additional firefighters. So it's my recommendation that you have the discussion whether you want to hire 9 or 12 firefighter paramedics over the next 2 to 3 years. I want to reach this minimum staffing. I'm going to set a goal by 2024, and that you create 4 overtime slots per crew in order for us to have give the employees, excuse me, I stated that wrong. You create 4 time off slots per crew, so the members of the local can have their ability to post their vacation time and paid time off, and so can our battalion chiefs, and we still have that basically a buffer from our sick time and our FMLA time. So what that requires, if we hire 9, and it's going to require overtime to do that. If you hire 12, then we don't have to do overtime. So that's the facts that I have to present to you, is that I see the city needing 3-person engine companies, 3 firefighter engine companies. While we can always have room for compromise in these discussions, again, I'm up against 52 years of lack of growth and an enormous, development of, or enormous excess of call volume. So we're up against some real hurdles that we're trying to meet every day. This morning we had multiple concurrent calls. We ran out of ambulances. We had to call in, I believe it was Safer came in this morning and assisted us as we were working a car fire, a traffic accident, and multiple EMS calls. It's a daily basis. I could come every day with a case study about why we're short. And if you haven't had the chance to see the public health and safety meeting where I highlighted a case study of a fire that we had on, I believe it was November 11th. It was a really good case study fire for why we have these needs. So that's my recommendations. And now I'm hoping we can engage in questions and discussion on it.
Go ahead.
If you have a 3-man engine crew and 2 on the med, and say you're at like you said, a car fire, if a med call came in, would those 2 med crew members be able to leave that fire call since you have 3 on that engine?
Yes.
But now they wouldn't.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and actually this morning that was the decision that had to be made because the rescue company had also gone. We had an EMS crew responding to that car fire, and as an EMS call rolled in, the battalion chief had to pivot and reassign that medical crew to the medical call. So that still left the battalion chief, an engineer, and a lieutenant to take care of the car fire. Now, a car fire, especially that one, it was in the middle of the street. It was on the city's west side. I can't remember exactly what the street. So there was no life safety. There's no exposures. That's something that the engine company can then take their time and put out. Now, it's just a lieutenant and an engineer. They're going to end up extinguishing that. They don't have a firefighter, they don't have a two-person fire attack crew. If we did have three-person engine companies, we would be able to then still have a two-person fire attack crew, someone on the pump and operating the truck, and then relieve the medic unit if another concurrent call were to happen, yes.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
When the aerial goes out, is there a dedicated crew for the aerial?
So, Tony, can we go to my second or third slide? Right there, next one, second slide, right there. All right, so this is our staffing makeup there, and I apologize, it's small, it's also in your packet. And so if you'll look there, in the middle section, it says Truck 1, Rescue 1, and Med 5, this is our fourth out EMS unit, is cross-staffed with 2. So if you come down to the station for a tour and I take you to that far wing that abuts the police department, I'm going to show you 3 pieces of apparatus. We have our 100-foot aerial platform, we have our heavy rescue truck, and we have our fourth out med unit. You'll see 2 sets of turnout gear in the middle of that room. There's 2 firefighters that cross-staff those 3 pieces of apparatus. And whatever the first call that comes in that dedicates them to one of those pieces of apparatus, they roll out and then the other 2 sit. Unfortunately, while I like to tell you that even 12 firefighters would solve that problem, it won't. We're trying to put firefighters on our engines, which is the real priority that we have to have. But unfortunately, that truck company will sit if a rescue call comes in, as it did this morning for that traffic accident. The ladder truck isn't available. Or a fourth out EMS call occurs, then those other 2 pieces of apparatus sit without staffing on it. It's very common in departments our size. I wish I had a solution. I don't, except more and more staffing. How we overcome that hurdle is if it's a large enough fire, then we can, if our ladder truck isn't available, we will request one from our neighboring jurisdictions through our MABUS agreements, or we'll try to call back staff to the station that then can bring that piece of apparatus to the fire. Now, one of the solutions that we're going to have, and thanks to the council in this community for stepping up a year ago, we ordered that new replacement truck 2. So you're going to see engine 2 switch to a Quint configuration, which has got a ladder on it. That's got a 75-foot straight stick ladder on it. That's going to be rolling out of Station 2, we hope sometime in May, depending on when we take delivery. So that will help with some of the ladder truck duties, in the fact that we'll have 2 engines and a ladder. It's actually a Quint type configuration coming to our fires. So I hope I answered that. There's a lot of factors that play into every decision that we make when these calls come in, and our staff is incredible at making spur-of-the-moment decisions about what's best for not just the call they're responding to, but in the evidence or in the incident, or if we were to have a concurrent call, how they're going to staff that also.
And last question, you said that you're paying overtime now to cover off time. And if you increase the staff, the odds are we're going to pay more overtime to cover that if you increase it by 9.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what that overtime amount would be? Would it compensate for some, if you added 12, compensate to some of that? Or?
I don't, and I don't know if I'm good enough, I'm good enough with the numbers to put that together. We could look at our trends. Now, 2021, we've had a large year for FMLA use, larger than normal. So we could look back and maybe chart kind of what an average is, but of course we're adding on additional firefighters, which will increase the availability of FMLA time because you've got a bigger exposure because you've got more employees. The other factor that we've had that's played into this overtime is we've been short the entirety of 2021. In 2021, we've had 9 departures, we had 5 retirements and 4 resignations, and we're still sitting at 5 positions short. Now, we're about to fill those. In early January, we've got 5 new employees starting, and we're going to finally go to a fully staffed department. So 2021 has been a really difficult year in that fact that we've got high overtime numbers because the lack of staff, increased use of FMLA, and our inability to have do our normal backfill because the crews have all been short without having to go into their vacation or those extra slots for posting vacation or sick leave or FMLA time.
I'm just thinking that if we go to a 12-man increase, the savings in overtime might be like, we're only actually going to a 9 or 10-man increase.
It could be. I can't stand here and say that will be a fact. I do anticipate that it will be much less than if we were to go to 9 as far as the overtime. I think it would help offset the hiring of going from 9 to 12. You know, I think that the thing that as I dug into this deeper, I kept saying I wanted to put a firefighter paramedic into the backseat of every engine. That's 3 engines, that's 9 firefighters. But now you look at the actual logistics of putting those into place, and it becomes more and more obvious that 12 is a potential solution to make it work.
And actually 12 would probably cost less per man with the savings of the overtime.
Possibly. I can work with Mary Ann and try to have some better numbers on that. Honestly, there's some trending, and we might need almost an actuary to put something together like that.
Go ahead.
Chief, you said you have 5, pardon me if I have trouble, I came from the dentist. You have 5 people that you will be putting on board in January?
In January, yes.
Okay. How do you go about and approach the opportunity or whatever to research to get firefighters? What is the procedure there? How do you go about and do that?
Sure. So our procedure for backfilling positions, so we have 62 positions. The city's been, Tony, when we have frequent conversations almost weekly. We know when we're going to have retirements. Typically, those are in advance. We know that if we don't have people on an eligibility list, which we haven't been able to put together an eligibility list for quite a while, that we need to advertise for firefighter paramedics. And so the HR department does that for us. I think this last time in 2021, did we have 4 postings or 5? At least 4, I know. We did 4 recruitment processes, and so the HR department advertises. We try to help. We push it on our social media. We recently put together some recruitment films, and we try to advertise, statewide or nationwide that we're hiring. They apply. We bring them in for a couple rounds of interviews. They have to have firefighter 2. They have to be a state certified or nationally registered paramedic. They've got to be hazmat ops certified. And so we're hiring people that are really ready to hit the street. Now, we've talked about with carrying all these openings, if we reduce those minimum qualifications, which we've already done once. We eliminated the need for an associate degree, which used to be our requirement. It was associate degree or 60 equivalent college credits. We shrunk back from that to hire just basically paramedics. We were worried that if we didn't start finding some qualified applicants, we might have to advertise for firefighters and train them as a paramedic, or hire a paramedic and train them as a firefighter. Luckily, we're going to roll into 2022 getting to flush. We're going to get to 62 staff, provided we get all 5 of these people on board. Of course, we anticipate some retirements in early of next year. The resignation part, you never know where that's going to come from. That usually really surprises us. So at least temporarily, we should be fully staffed.
I have a question, Madam Chair. So if you're looking for 12 firefighters, what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Well, I think that, that's going to be really dictated probably by the Finance Committee. And here's the options that I've discussed with Mary Ann, and I know she's got even more, is one that, there's a possibility that that we could hire 3 initially in 2022 using possibly some the ARP funding, and then I would apply for staffing for effective fire and emergency services grant, a SAFER grant. Brookfield Fire Department just successfully wrote one of these grants last year. That grant fully funds the firefighters. I believe it's a 5-year grant. It fully funds, I believe, the first 2 years, and then it trickles down, leaving the municipality holding the long-term expense for those additional staffing. So then if we were to write that grant, be successful, that would then drive it. We would probably hire whatever I've written for in 2023, because I would write that grant in 2022 once it opens up. The other option that's, been kicked around is the possibility of going to a referendum, as other communities in the state have done in the last year. In the last year, Grand Chute, Fond du Lac, and Beaver Dam have all successfully put out referendums for hiring firefighters in their communities. And they've had in Fond du Lac, Theirs carried by, it was for 6 firefighter paramedics and 6 police officers, and it carried in last November's election with a 70% approval rating. And so I think that public service is enjoying right now a high public approving rating in an election that was divided by, a percentage point.
Go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, are we looking for a motion tonight, or are we?
Yes,
Can
we
we
are.
go the referendum route? I mean, if we went the referendum route,
I think
that would,
HR committee should kind of stick to our, what we're going to do is the number of firefighters that we'll recommend going to finance. We will have a crack at it at council about a referendum or whatever.
Okay.
But I think to make it a clean slate, we should make a motion with the amount of firefighters that the HR committee feels is necessary to have the fire department up to an appropriate level. From there, it will go to finance. They will delve into whatever, and it'll bounce back to council again. So I hate to get into the funding mechanisms such as referendums, because that will be done by finance. But
Okay.
we certainly can make a motion for the
So-
amount.
okay, so then, in regards to, not only the safety of our personnel, but the safety for our city, I will make the motion that we move forward and hire the 12 recommended firemen, paramedics.
Okay. And I have a second by Wadinsky. Any other comments? Go ahead, Michael.
Question. So I'm just kind of wrapping my head around, the difference between 9 firefighters and 12 firefighters. And I guess what you're saying is the key difference is that there isn't the addition of those 3 extra firefighters, and I'm guessing there'd be 1 assigned to each of the
True,
3
yep.
stations, is that that person then, we're still staffing the trucks, the engines with 3 and the meds with 2, so there's a 5-person crew, but that extra person assigned to each of the stations allows for a better, to better facilitate time off. So
Correct.
It's kind of like a ghost person, I guess.
Well, not exactly. And one point I should have done a better chance of taken more time to explain, is in the case so basically the 12 person will allow us to go from 3 paid time off slots to 4 as we increase the staff. So right now we've got 2 paid time off slots for the union, 1 for the battalion chiefs that then we also use for sick leave and FMLA time. Now, what happens when the vacation calendar isn't full? That we've got 18 minimums, but we've got 19 firefighters on duty. Well, that's when the cross staffing of truck 1, rescue 1, and med 5, our 4th out ambulance, that's where we shift that excess personnel then, is we start putting extra firefighter paramedics in the seats of those cross-staffed apparatus. And that would be the priority, is to move people. Maybe we have, on a rare circumstance, it's tough to anticipate the impact of the opening of a 3rd vacation slot for the union, but I would imagine the shoulder seasons when it's not popular vacation time, January, February, March, pick a weekday, middle of December, maybe it's not as popular. There could be times where we're close to that full 21 or 22 person crews. Believe me, we will use those people and we will assign them to apparatus. And so when we say minimum, we want to be above minimum, but the majority of the time is this entirety of 2021, we sat at 15 person minimums every day this calendar year, and we have to anticipate for those the use of paid time off, FMLA, and sick leave. And so that 4th spot would be basically allow us to have that buffer to offer our employees. It increases the appeal of the positions too. It increases the appeal of the department. Now, instead of 17 people in the union picking between 2 vacation slots, you're going to have 21 picking between 3. And so the ratio goes up. They get a little bit better chance at maybe a little bit better vacation time. And then it still allows us that 4th spot for the battalion chief to take his paid time off unencumbered. The other problem that I anticipated too with that is now picture yourself in that battalion chief's position, that every time that you want to take a paid day off, the department's got to post overtime. And you know you're going to force someone, you want to take Christmas Day off. And now you're going to have to force another employee to work that overtime because you want to take your paid leave. That really, when we've got people of outstanding moral and ethical character, that really becomes a difficult decision for them. I was placed in that decision process a lot in my prior job, and I always chose to work those holidays rather than see someone else forced to.
Okay, and then, in that regard, so it would be conceivable that there will be days when, not all of the vacation slots are full.
Yes.
So we'll have, I guess, a better than minimum staff department then.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay, and then my second question has to do with the command and supervision, because you did state here in your memo that you wouldn't need to, we're just adding rank and file firefighters. We're not adding any kind of administrative or management staff to the department.
Correct. That's the nice thing about our span of the control and the way our department is designed, and a really great paramilitary style hierarchy. If the effective command and control for a line officer is considered 6 to 8. And right now, those lieutenants, they're really supervising an engineer and the 2 firefighters over on the med. So they're only supervising 3. Adding an additional firefighter paramedic expands their scope only by 1 and is still underneath the span of control. And underneath the battalion chief's span of control, we're not increasing the number of lieutenants. So he's still supervising the number of lieutenants. Literally, the best part about this initiative, it's literally boots on the ground firefighter paramedics that can staff any of our apparatus. They can, move to that 4th out med when we've got excess staff on hand, if the vacation calendar isn't completely filled. And they can also always have 3 people on an engine company to meet those needs. And it's not just about the firefighting, it's also, today we had an engine company available, but we didn't have a med unit available. So that call that they had Safer coming in to assist with us, the engine company went there to serve as a first responder unit. So now you've got an engineer, a lieutenant, likely at least one of those 2 is a paramedic. The firefighter paramedic in the back seat is fresh right from the ambulance. You're working on it every day, and we're rendering really good medical care right off the engine also. An ALS, a true advanced life support engine.
I'm pretty confident that the community is going to be on board with this request, because I lived in the city all my life, and now that I'm getting a little older, when I want a med, I want it to my house quickly. I don't want to wait for an outside agency to be a couple minutes longer getting to my medical emergency, and I think all our citizens are going to feel the same way. They want that response quick. We have a professional agency, one of the top in the state, and we want them there as quick as we can. And I think adding more staff is going to help with that response. It's going to make it safer for our citizens with having more staff immediately on a fire or EMS scene. And it's going to make it safer for our staff having more support within the scene. So I don't think that it's going to be that big a problem. I know our finance is going to look at that and come up with decent ways to fund it, no matter which way it goes. And I think we're going to have some savings with the overtime that'll help with that. And I would like any of my constituents to email me personally at my city address and let me know what you think.
I appreciate that, and I feel exactly the same way. We're blessed with a great department, a great community that we're sworn to protect. Our people they're all in effort every day on every call is amazing, and how they can anticipate not the needs of the call that they're currently on, but anticipate trying to get ready for the next concurrent call that could get ready, and their ability to pivot on that is amazing. And the added staff will only increase our abilities to do that and meet the community demand. The demand is here. It's our staff just has not caught up. And it's one of the beautiful things of living in a community like ours is when you do have an emergency, you can have an engine or an ambulance at your front door in 3 to 5 minutes with some highly qualified professional people that are ready to go about some unbelievable work to enact a positive change. in that person's life in that moment in time. Since I first made the presentation in the Common Council on November 9th, I've had a number of contacts with the community have reached out to me, and so far I've only had overwhelming support for the initiative. I haven't seen or heard anything on the opposing side where they're not in favor of it yet. I'm still waiting to hear that, and I'm of course prepared to be the subject matter expert and answer any of the questions. And I want to hear the tough questions, because that's really the community needs to know, that we're not being wasteful of their money, that we're going about it thoughtfully and precisely, and that we're going to meet the most amount of needs that we can with the least amount of money that we possibly can get away with on it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any further questions or comments before we vote? Seeing none, we have a motion, and I will remind it is to recommend to finance and on to council that we hire over the next couple of years up to 12 firefighters. All in favor say aye.
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 I myself. Any opposed? No, that passes.
Thank you. You probably hear the cheering at the fire station right now. I'm there watching, so thank you.
You're welcome. We are next on number 4, discussion of possible action establishing a longevity program for non-represented employees.
So the Finance Committee, last time they met, instructed HR staff to look at the longevity program for our non-represented employees. This is actually a topic that this committee considered pretty extensively back in 2019. I think we had at least 2, maybe 3 meetings on the topic. So in your packet, I compiled that information. We had a pretty tight turnaround, so I wasn't able to do any additional surveys. But when we looked into this matter in 2019, what we discovered was that pretty much all municipalities eliminated longevity programs for their non-represented employees. We surveyed department heads on the topic, and the directors were split, really kind of all over the board on whether they thought that this program would be worth the bang for the buck. Costs is estimated between $40,000 and $50,000. The cost grows per year, and that's assuming that we brought back the longevity program that was in place for City Hall represented employees. The city of Wausau never offered longevity for its non-represented employees, so its managers and supervisors never received longevity, so we don't have a program for non-reps to bring back. What we have is the program that the employees that were represented that lost representation after Act 10 because they didn't certify, the program that they had. I don't know if there's any questions or thoughts.
Question, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
For these non-represented employees, would it be possible for, I mean, it is my understanding that at one time, they were unionized employees until Act 10, and then they elected to go out of a union, is that correct?
Some were and some weren't. So the AFSCME union didn't recertify, so the employees that were represented by that union became non-represented. But our managers and our supervisors were always non-represented, and they never had a union. So yes and no.
Any thoughts on this? Go ahead.
I like longevity because I'm old, but I'm not working anymore, so I don't get any. But I think longevity would be great. It's a great way to appreciate long-term employees. However, we're looking to retain employees over the broad spectrum from day one to last day of work. So I think longevity is the wrong way to go for a retention program at this time. I think there's something else we have to do with what, I'm not sure, but I just think longevity is the wrong approach for retention.
And then I'll get you, yeah, I think longevity came into the discussion from finance as we were looking at the quick changes that we did this fall, trying to get ahead of the curve with the wage changes, within our country and within our area, and trying to, retain and recruit. And so when it went to finance, and I watched that meeting, it was, the chair of finance was, she was kind of iffy about, and other finance people were iffy about that 1,000 lump sum payment this year. And it was done due to the fact of exactly what you said, because our newer employees are going to raise up. We got rid of 2 levels, but then we're going to have compression because the people that were here maybe in the middle aren't going to get those 2 steps. And then we have them too close together, and that wasn't fair. And, there's no perfect method. There's just not, we spent a long time on that. So they were going, and I think we had that discussion in this committee as well. We don't, take it and run. We don't really, the one lump sum it left bad taste in some mouths, and what should we do? So that's where the idea of longevity came from. Now, this is what happened before. We could redo longevity to start lower, or whatever. I think we would need to re-look at the department heads and say what they're seeing. They're the boots on the ground, per se. And so this is just kind of a first look. I don't expect this longevity to be fleshed out tonight. I was back in 2019 as a positive. I wanted longevity. This was my baby because I had heard from people that you get so far and then you don't get anything. And it is, I know that I had it in my job, that it is kind of when you have this big shift in wages, those people here are usually the ones that are left behind. The new people we have to hire, we're going to pay them more because we need them in. We're going to offer them more vacation, and then we just sit there and, they skip over us, and we didn't want that to happen with our good employees. So that just gives you a little bit background of why this came. It can be longevity, it can be anything, but finance basically thought they would like something more than here's $1,000 one time. They wanted something that would churn. So, this is just kind of a template of what could happen. I would like us to flesh that out, or we could give some ideas, get it back to the HR director and flesh it out more. I think it deserves some discussion. Go ahead, Alder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't like the idea of, first of all, having union and non-union employees, because that in itself causes animosity in between people. I would like to see one system for all, and if you're going to create a longevity program for the non-represented employees, how is that going to reflect on the represented employees?
Yeah, so our represented employees currently have longevity systems in place that they've bargained for. And those longevity rates are included in your packets. They're different per union because each union bargains separately. Also, the pay structures are pretty substantially different between the union and the non-union. I mean, we've been talking about this for quite some time, but, most of the union scales max out after a limited number of steps, whereas the non-reps have a lot of steps. And part of the reason for that was at the time longevity was built into that scale. And so they really are different systems that make them difficult to compare.
So,
Go ahead, Michael.
yep, so you just mentioned that, what the big difference between the represented and the non-represented employees is number of steps, and the longevity kind of in the represented sphere sort of fills in the gaps, whereas we do have a smoother progression with our non-represented employees. I guess what I'd like to see is, we've got some scales here, and I think those, I vaguely remember the discussion from 2 years ago. And it wasn't, it's, all I can remember, without going back to the minutes, all I can remember is it didn't really go very far in our conversation. And I guess maybe, I don't know if this is, because of the number of steps we have in the non-represented sphere, if longevity is the correct tool for retention, or if it, so maybe if we could massage these numbers a little bit to have, or at least go back to staff, the directors, to see, what their thoughts are 2 years later, if it kind of mirrors what they are, what they saw, because the workplace is different now than it was 2 years ago.
We are forming an employee relations committee where employees will have kind of an opportunity for some two-way discussion when we're talking about programs like this, and perhaps longevity would be a good initial topic to bring to that group to get some feedback directly from employees, as well as surveying the department directors. This is certainly a topic that I could do more legwork on. Our vacation policy is at the point of, tomorrow night we're voting on whether that's going to be substantially changed as well. And, these are all things that will come into play when considering longevity. Ideally, I'd like my longevity increases to not happen right when I got a huge vacation increase too. We want to stagger those things so that there's always a benefit coming up in the future for our more senior employees. Like I said, this was just kind of the content of our previous discussions as a starting point.
Yeah, and I guess, I know, so far this fall, we've attacked all of the low-hanging fruit. And now it feels like we're getting to the point we're just throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And, it's, as much as I like longevity, I think we need to look at something, instead of piecemeal, something a little bit more holistic. So, especially if, like you said, if we're gonna revamp vacation, how is that gonna affect, what we're giving out in longevity, so.
Would it be possible to take the non-represented employees and perhaps put them in a union so they can be all as, we can have all as one?
We can't. Particularly with the unions that we have right now, we're exempt from Act 10. So our police union, our fire union, and our transit union are not subject to the restrictions of Act 10, which means that they can bargain things that other unions could not. So unfortunately, that state legislation kind of makes it so that we can't do the things that you were hoping we could do.
Thank you.
I look at when I used to be in the union years back, and we'd negotiate, and we had comparables. And comparables were, everybody was close, in certain ways. Some were higher, some were lower, but you were close. And then I hear last month that we lost a public works employee to a different community close by to us because they were offering more pay. So maybe what we need to do for the non-representatives is get some comparables. What are other communities paying their people?
Right.
And not Sheboygan or Appleton, but, Marathon County and some cities our size.
Right.
What are those comparables? And then maybe look at paying the same or maybe a little more than they are for retention. Maybe that's all we need to do. Maybe we don't need to do all these other things. Maybe this is what.
Right, does it?
Yeah, so one of the items that we do as part of our market study is compare our salaries to the market, which is pretty much what you're talking about, that process of checking with comparables. one item that I'm looking to do at our next wage study is to do a custom survey. With our previous study, we used published surveys, and I do think that it was a good survey, but where we're finding that a lack is that some of those local comparisons didn't participate in those surveys, and thus, with a custom survey, we'll be able to pick and choose who we're compared to and ask them to fill out a survey for us. So we'll be able to target our results to our competition.
I think maybe that's where we
Now-
might be losing a little bit on the
One-
local township that may want to
Well, and,
pay slightly more.
one thing that I want to draw in mind is, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same individual, but I do know of people who have changed jobs because the pay was more, but the position came with no insurance, no pension, and there was a pretty severe loss in
Sure.
total compensation package. So each individual is motivated by their particular circumstances, so that can be tricky to do when you're looking at just those local comparisons, because every employee's got different needs and different things they're looking for in a job.
Well, I'll tell everybody here, money is good, but the benefits really come in handy when you really need it.
Very true.
So what is this committee's pleasure about this longevity? Again, it was kicked back to us from finance. Like I said, this is kind of a template of what we looked at a couple years ago. Things have changed quite a bit. And the way we're looking at things has changed quite a bit, as you can see what's even on our council agenda for tomorrow of what we're looking at doing. So we can certainly kick the can back to our HR director and say, and come up with something else. I guess I just want to make sure that our employees that are non-represented are not going to be compressed with the changes we're going to make for the new employees. And call it longevity, call it whatever. We need to make sure that we keep those seasoned employees our employees. So I guess I don't want to just, kind of say, well, let's just move on. I think that maybe we should do more research and get some more, and she can come back in the next couple of months, with some good research and, come up with maybe a better plan. It doesn't have to be called longevity, but I do believe we need to keep researching this.
I'm not comfortable with the way it is right now. I have to agree with Alder Wadinsky. We need to look at some more comparables and stuff and what we should do to retain our employees. Thank you.
Okay, I need to clarify that. Are we looking at doing that now or at the next, when is our next wage study?
The current schedule for the wage study is every 5 years. So we would be going to, I want to say we go to market, for an RFP next year, do the work in 2023, and have the wage study published in '24. Then they would be published 5 years apart.
So, I doubt anybody wants to wait that long. And so I guess I need to clarify, when people want to look at comparables, we would have to pick what job descriptions you're looking at. Are you looking at a specific department? Are you looking at all? Then we're almost into a wage study type of thing if we're looking at all job descriptions. And that gets to be, we usually, for people that are new, we usually get a consultant, and that's what the RFP is. We get a consultant in. We had Gallagher the last time, the same company that Marathon County used, to do that work and come back. And then we look at every job description. We try to look at everything. And so that's why it's a longer process. I'm getting the feeling that nobody wants to wait that long. So I want to kind of get the focus of the scope of what you guys want our HR director to look at. But if we just say comparables, we need to know what job descriptions you're looking at or what, because I just fear if we're going to do all that's non-represented, it's just, it will be taking a long, long time. And by the time we get that, it'll all be changed anyway. That's what happens with these things.
Yeah, a wage study generally, I would anticipate for our next wage study, we'd need to establish a budget of somewhere between $250,000 and in order to fund both the study and the recommended changes. So I mean, I think that if this committee wanted me to look into additional ways to recognize non-represented employees who are above midpoint, or other options for a longevity program, that would be something that might be a little bit more realistic timeline. Doing a wage study kind of on our own piecemeal, I just couldn't recommend it.
Go ahead.
I would not suggest we advance a wage study before it's due, but I would think that HR directors must have a organization or contacts between each other. Maybe, I can't imagine we're the only city that's having this problem. Can our director make contact with other communities to see what their problems are and what their suggestions are and what they're doing, and bring us, and give them some more ideas, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be looking for like what areas, we have reached out to other communities about their recruitment and retention issues and what initiatives they're putting into place. We did that back in October, and what we found was really most other municipalities aren't making a lot of sweeping changes at this point, other
Right.
than looking at some minor vacation changes. We really are kind of ahead of the pack here. When we are looking at wages, I would caution against too heavily relying upon comparables, because you can be subject to price setting violations, and that's one of the reasons why we do usually hire an expert to make sure we stay on the right side of those evaluations.
And I guess the only thing that I keep thinking is that what specific do you want comparables from? I mean, are you looking for a certain, like she said, for people above midpoint, non-represented? We just can't say comparables for the non-represented, because how many do we have in non-represented approximately?
Employees or jobs?
Well.
I would say we've got about 150.
It'd be 150, and that doesn't mean, and there's various, I mean, how many job descriptions maybe?
Probably like 100.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if you get the employee committee together,
Yeah.
that might be a good
That's a
start
good
for us and a
start.
good input for us to have some realistic ideas of what would help.
Definitely.
When is that scheduled?
We have one group that has a tie, so they need to revote. So it's causing us a slight delay, but we're hoping to have the first meeting in January.
Maybe we should let them meet, and then can we retickle this to come back like the month after?
Yes.
Okay,
Good
so
idea.
does that sound good?
And bring us their
Right. Recommendations?
recommendations,
Or
correct?
the-
Yes.
And that way she could have time in digesting it for a month and bringing something forward. Does that sound like a plan?
And I would think it's what's really in their hearts,
Yeah,
what
what's
would
in their
really-
minds of what would be something that would keep them here.
Right.
Right, I think that's good. I don't want to use a dartboard either, but I don't want to get so wide that we're just kind of flailing around with data, because that gets really enormously hard at times. So that is how we're going to do that, so we are not going to need to vote on that. Oh, go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, with the people that we lose, that or leave for one reason or another, lost my train of thought. Okay, I know what I wanted to say. Basically, I want to know if the people that are leaving, a lot of them are leaving before 5 years. Because to me, anytime after 5 years, I really feel that people will stay in the position longer because of the benefits. And up until 5 years, I guess I'd be curious to know why.
Sure. I would say usually we lose most of the people before 5 years,
Okay.
sometimes 7 years. There's that 7-year itch for jobs too, as well as the stereotypical. So yeah, I would say the bulk of them are before 5, but if I was going to look at the pure numbers, I would say probably earlier than 7.
Anything else? Okay. Discussion and possible action establishing a budget for discretionary performance incentives.
So speaking about flailing with data, at the last committee meeting, we talked about discretionary performance incentives and establishing a dedicated budget for this. The main benefits for that was going to be fair utilization, because right now a department has to have a vacancy So our departments that have stable workforces don't get to recognize their employees. So I considered a number of distribution methods for a budget. I met with the finance director and we're recommending a dedicated budget of $100,000. And when we looked at how to spread that budget out amongst departments, we came up with a couple of different ideas. The first was just to evenly distribute it by department or by division. What happened with that is that the bigger departments, everybody got the same amount, but the bigger departments have more people, so they got less per person, and some of the small departments had a lot of money. The other option is the prorated distribution, which is a certain amount per person. But the problem with that is that our small departments were left with so small of an amount as to be insufficient for a true recognition. So I landed on a modified approach that used both. It's a prorated distribution, so the larger departments get more money, but with a guaranteed minimum. And I apologize, there's a typo in here. The guaranteed minimum was actually $2,500, not $1,500. And with that guaranteed minimum, the smaller departments were left with enough to truly recognize one or two employees, but the larger departments were left with the bulk. If we're going to do our recommended distribution amount, we will want to decide if we want it prorated amongst department or amongst division. So I have a list in your packet of the list of departments, which is basically each department director, and then just a rough list of divisions. They get, regardless of which path we choose, you get the same amount of money per person, but for division, you can't transfer it around. So for example, if we give a prorated amount for public works, Eric, I'm going to pick on you because you're here and you have the most divisions. For public works, Eric would get a large amount of money and he would be able to use it across all of his employees. He wouldn't be forced to leave a certain amount for sewer, a certain amount for water. He'd just have a big pot to use as he sees fit amongst his employees. If we prorated it according to division, he would have an established prorated amount for each of his subdivisions, water, sewer, streets. And he couldn't take sewer money and recognize water people with it or vice versa. So really the main difference is the amount of discretion that the directors would have. Go ahead.
What do the directors want?
So the math was tricky, and this item I didn't have a chance to speak to the directors about before it came before you. So that I'm not able to speak to. We have 3 here today, which is a minority of directors, but we could.
Well, I would like input from them, if they want to have input.
Sure.
And I like your suggestion on the modified.
Yes.
The only thing that scares me is if some employees may think that's just some favoritism or something going on, because, that always comes out. So would it be possible that no matter what we do with this, that that they have to report back to this committee with who got what and why? So it's at least being stated to a committee that this is happening. Not that we're going to say no or yes, but that I don't want to have any authority to do that, but I think that we should at least be notified what's happening each time or each month or whenever it's done.
So the process would remain the same with directors make a recommendation and HR director would approve it with program compliance. We could add a section to the HR committee packet that gave you a running tally
Yeah,
of
just a report would be fine,
DPIs
yeah.
that are given.
A little more open that way.
That would be easy enough to do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess Alder Wadinsky took the words right out of my mouth because I too am worried about favoritism. I've been working in the private section long enough to know that it exists, and I don't want to see any employee get singled out, because he's got differences with his supervisor and stuff, even though his job performance is above others, So I certainly would like to see, if there's going to be X amount of dollars given to each department, I would like to see X amount of dollars distributed evenly amongst the employees in that department. So everybody is treated equal. Thank you.
One item that we did build in, and this was actually an idea that Mary Ann had that I thought was really good, was to maintain the integrity of the fund. Because ideally, we'd have 100,000 annually, which means every year we have to replenish that amount. If departments have vacancies that result in salary savings, they would be obligated to use that funding first. So they wouldn't go to their bank. They would use their own salary savings first. And that would keep our balance healthy so that when we are replenishing it each year, hopefully it will be a lesser amount. If that makes sense. So for example, if I have one person who's gone and I want to recognize my other employee, I would have to use my salary savings for my vacancy first. I'd still be subject to my total cap, so I don't get to use my vacancies to sneak my way into more money. But I would use my salary savings first and not touch my budget so that my budget rolls over to next year.
And from what I understand, a lot of these recognitions are for going above and beyond because they're short-staffed and they're taking an extra load, so
That is
that's a great
common
reason for that.
yes.
I guess I want to respond to Alder Larson. That does not mean when you do these, they're called discretionary. So that does not mean that it is distributed evenly through every employee, correct?
Yeah, the purpose of the performance incentive is to recognize employees who have gone above and beyond. So if we were distributing it evenly to everybody, it gets rid of that recognition component. We're trying to single out the people who really have done exemplary work, whether it is picking up extra duties, additional tasks, or just really going above and beyond in some way, shape, or form.
I understand, I like it, but it's still going to create a lot of animosity.
And if we do a report to this committee that could state, would that be able to state why they're getting it? Because
Yes.
kind of give us an idea what it's for. I think that would help everyone understand that it's a little more fair.
Transparency.
I guess one of the points of this program too is that there's not an expectation to spend all of the money. But as long as each department or division is capped, then they know what they have to use. And because ideally, you want to be able to recognize people, but at the same time too, you don't want to be able to, we're putting more burden on the taxpayers with this.
Yes, this is in most cases, this will be base building increases. So when we're funding the 100,000, we should be prepared for that to be a $100,000 increase to your payroll costs for the following budget year. And no, I wouldn't expect all departments to spend all money. We'll probably see some heavy usage as soon as it gets funded because we have a number of employees who have been unable to be recognized that I'm sure there will be an upswell at the beginning when we've been waiting to recognize these folks. I mean, I have at least one or two sitting on my desk that I've had to deny, not because the employee doesn't qualify for recognition, but because there's no fund available. But that said, I don't want us to get into the habit of it diminishes the recognition if you just take turns handing it out to all of your employees. So we want to make sure that it is really reserved for people who have done something to deserve of that recognition.
Do you know what the average recognition amount is?
The minimum cap that I set was right in the ballpark of the average recognition amount.
Okay.
Which is how much?
It's 2,500, and I would say the average recognition varied between 15 to 2,500.
Okay. So this would give with the floor, each department would have the ability to recognize at least one person.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe that would be a great incentive for someone to stay longer, knowing that somewhere down the line, if they're doing a really good job or doing more than is expected, hey, there's something good at the end of that for them.
Well, and really, if we can recognize our employees who have gone above and beyond that, we'll have a positive morale impact, and people who are happy with their jobs don't look for other jobs.
Do we need a motion? I would move that we authorize the budgeted formula the director has put forth with the modified, what's the word I'm looking for?
I know you want the modified funding approach of the prorated distribution with a guaranteed minimum.
Correct.
Do you want that divided by department or division?
What do you think is better?
You know, I don't know that there's a right or wrong. It really depends upon whether you want to dedicate amount per employee group or if you want to give your directors more discretion. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer.
I'd be okay with more discretion, but before I vote for this at council, I want a little input from the directors.
And I can do that. I believe this item would need to go to finance. I'd have to talk to Mary Ann about that. So I can have that information before it gets to that committee as well as to council.
Thank you.
We have a motion? We have a second? Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Otherwise, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes. We are now down to announcements. I have never asked for an announcement before, but this is for me to my committee. The finance that we had passed at the last HR meeting about the lump sum payment, which has changed from bonus. I want to apologize to each of you for any nasty comments you have received. I've received many about using the word bonus. In retrospect, that was my error. I should have caught that. Bonus apparently triggered some people, and it morphed into this big deal. And I have been called union buster and everything else, and I hope none of you had that. And that was never our deal at all. We never did that. We were trying to recognize employees that were going to be compressed, as I talked about tonight. So I just want to apologize to you. I will be much more careful in the wording of things. It was done in a media story, and it got all gobbledygooked. And I just want to apologize to my committee. I thought long and hard about that. I took you down a road that I did not mean by using the word bonus, and I will be much more careful, so thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I don't feel there's no apology necessary. I mean, we're all human, we're all put on this earth to strive for perfection. You know, just because somebody doesn't like a word, well, then, oh, well.
Yeah.
You know, what we're doing here is we're trying to do what's best for our community and our employees, and thank you anyway.
Okay, thank you. Now we are ready to adjourn. So moved. We are adjourned. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.